Hello everyone, I hope you're having a great day. We've covered a lot of gods up to this point. We've covered Loki, Sun Wukong, Erlong Shen, and a bunch of other gods. But every once in a while, YouTubers like to mix things up a bit, and I'm going to do that. So, I'm going to be covering Nike today, but instead of going over all of her lore and every single piece of information I can find out about her, instead, we're going to be covering all the information that would be relevant in discussing how powerful she is in almost every sense of the word. So to start things off with, she was a god that was present in both Greek mythology and Roman mythology, as Victoria or Nike, respectively. And being a fairly well-known goddess, thanks to the fact that she was associated with, victory, a fairly important thing, especially if you're the type of peoples that would be involved in combat a lot and, you'd want to win, Nike could be useful to that. The things that she could bestow upon you, i.e. victory, winning, and not horrifically losing and dying and knowing your way of life would being gone? Yeah, quite useful. Now, an item associated with Nike was the laurel, and it was an assortment of shrubs and plants and flowers, and those are all fashioned together into a crown. Emperors wore them to show off how godlike they were, and heroes or people given certain distinctions for heroic deeds, very significant actions, were also given this same tier of laurel. Now, other tiers of laurels did exist. Mostly they were given to soldiers and people within different ranks of the military. For instance, generals were given a certain type of laurel if they managed to win a siege battle, for instance. Soldiers could be given an extremely valorous laurel if they were able to achieve some sort of very significant action, such as saving a comrade in battle. And in that case, if they were given this very nice laurel, they were reserved as placed next to senators at public events. So, very prestigious stuff. But also laurels were worn all throughout different areas of society. See, priests wore laurels, funeral attendees or types of people that attended funerals may have worn laurels. They were also worn by people during celebrations or festivals, but specifically they were associated with Nike, and she herself would bestow winners of contests, for instance, with a laurel to prove and show off how great they were and how important or significant their victory was, usually at some sort of contest or competition. Hence why people who partook in these contests or competitions decided that it was a good idea to pray to Nike to make sure that they had the goddess's favor, so that they may indeed win, so that they may indeed get a laurel, which means happy times for them. As a goddess herself, Nike came with a functional pair of wings. In other words, she had the ability to fly, and she was also given a lot of the abilities that were common across Greek gods, such as immortality and shape-shifting, extra special strength, things like that. Specifically for Nike, though, she, like, say, someone like Mercury, or I suppose Hermes, if we're talking about the Greek versions of these gods, even though I'm going to be interchangeably using I'm not going to be interchangeably using Nike and Victoria, but whatever. She was credited with having, or being, a particularly speedy runner. So that's another ability you could chalk down. I'm sure that would be useful in combat, the ability to run away or to run up to someone to prevent them from harming someone. There's a bunch of applications for fast running, of course. Zeus himself welcomed her into his service, along with her other siblings as well, but she specifically was made his great charioteer. Which, of course, means that, like Apollo, she has the ability to pilot chariots. Would that be piloting chariots? Is that the right word to use? Meh. When Zeus decided to engage in a conflict against the Titans, and/or the Giants, Nike was there by his side, helping him lead the troops, or just there as a symbol. Symbolically helping him lead the troops. And so remember how I was talking about all the different places in which laurels pop up in Greek society? You can imagine the profound effect that her presence would have during a battle if she was one day deciding to actually physically show up on the battlefield and help a specific side. The other side may even surrender, just because of the sheer amount of status and importance she has in her society. So if she has that kind of power, and of course, goddess of victory, so you'd kind of be screwed if she outright showed you the favor that the other side would have of hers against you. Sad times. Now, in terms of a comparison that you could make between her and a lot of gods, in terms of myths and legends, there aren't that many for Nike. One reason for this that I found is that, well, purely because of her status as a god, and by having a disconnect between emotional myths and the goddess, it deifies her a little bit more. Apparently, that's just an explanation I found. She's also been described as being beautiful ankled Nike, so she was probably quite pretty. Which means, of course, she has the whole feminine charms that she could pull out if she wanted to, I suppose. Goddess of victory, why not use anything you can to win? A difference between the mythological Nike and Smite's Nike is that the mythological Nike and mentionings of her seem to emphasize her rewarding victors rather than influencing that victor's victory, whereas in Smite, if you read her lore bio, it's very clear that she is clearly responsible for victories. You want her on your side, and if you lose a game with Nike, well, that game didn't happen. That's like filler. Like, you know, when you're watching a show and you can clearly tell this episode doesn't really matter to the overall story, and you could skip this episode and you really wouldn't be losing all that much unless you really liked the episode, or it had some nice character development or whatever that you wouldn't get anyway. Well, Nike's not a filler god in Smite. You kind of need her to win, apparently, according to the story. Or at least according to her lore bio, but there you go. That's also probably why we haven't seen her in the story yet, because that is kind of an OP thing. Hey, I'm a guaranteed win! How does that work narratively? You don't think that would be a little boring if, you know, Zeus probably wouldn't have died? In fact, where was she while Zeus was dying? Her mythological version said that her mythological version apparently was quite closely by Zeus's side a lot of the time, and also by Athena's side. She was associated heavily with Athena, but it's made clear that they're not necessarily the same god, or that sometimes there's an issue with gods and goddesses where they're equated to be one and the same. Sometimes that issue doesn't seem to be a thing for Nike. Nike's also one of the older gods, apparently. But yeah, while Zeus was getting the old stabby treatment from Loki, where was Nike? Probably not in the game, which is fair enough, but even still, how does Hi-Rez explain that away? I wonder. But yes, that was pretty much the video on Nike. In terms of how powerful she would be against other gods, well, goddess of victory, necessary for the win, that's pretty OP in and of itself. I'm not saying that would give her the ability to murder any god she'd feel like, but to win against any god she'd feel like, well, yeah, she'd probably have that. So yeah. So when you take in abilities like Nike's and you pair it with the ability to have future sight, see into the future, well, it would seem like you couldn't lose, but Nike's not exactly immune from taking injury or being disabled. If you were to remove some of her limbs or disable her body systems, be that through poison, mental attacks, there's probably not all that much that she could do at that point. For example, if a goddess like Sekhet was able to have some sort of paralyzing poison, that could be an issue for her. And beyond even that, there are gods in the game that not only can't die, but also are personifications of intangible things, where Nike is a physical representation of what she resides over, being victory. Nox, or Kronos, are both personifications of intangible things like darkness and time. And I think gods like that are on a different level to Nike. She probably couldn't murder or destroy them in a fight to the death, I don't think. She'd come out on top in that sense, because that seems a bit, well, impossible. But even still, there are plenty of gods in the game that Nike pretty much has a win condition against. It might not necessarily be instant, but it's practically a victory guarantee, thanks to the fact that she's residing over victory. I suppose with Smite gods specifically, it's not impossible to think that the gods that would be able to see into the future might not necessarily have those abilities if we consider the events of Smite's story. I mean, if that was the case, Zeus probably would have been a lot less surprised that he was not only attacked, but might also have known exactly who attacked him. Might have known who attacked him instantaneously, I mean. So, there's that. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give me a like. That always leaves a smile on my face. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. And until the next video, have a very good day. I have been Prime, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. Also, shall we just add that Nike literally has wings on her back and literally really doesn't use them? She has a leap for some reason, but she can't fly unless she equips a skin? Okay, or use a chariot at all. The chariot is fair enough, you've already used that with Apollo, and there are plenty of other gods that use chariots in their mythology, and you don't utilize that, but Nike could have flown. You know, you've got plenty of gods that fly, but that doesn't take away from the uniqueness of other gods being able to fly, right? Whatever.